We have now the second presentation of the afternoon by Xavier Vilajosana, and he's going to present the influence of the teaching proposal on the educational results in physical education in secondary students.
Thank you so much. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you all to come here. The title of my thesis doctoral is The Influence of the Teaching Proposal on the Educational Results in Physical Education in Secondary Students. Well, I'm going to present the structure of this presentation. I'm going to explain the interest in the research, the contextualization. After, I'm going to describe the cases, the objective and methodology, and it's important to understand the link between the conceptual ACEs and the data collection instruments. Well, it's important why I want to do this research. Sometimes in education studies, we refer exclusively about teaching action, but what is the influence of the teaching action about educative students? So, on the other hand, some new tendencies focus on learning students, for example, in motivation or emotions. In this lane, our interest is to link both with a psycho-educational perspective. In this case, I'm going to present the contextualization. It's important to understand the teaching learning processes about a socio-constructivist perspective. In this same, we keep in mind three elements to are important: the teacher who teaches, the contents that are learned, and finally the students who learn. So the intention and objective is how the teaching proposal impacts on educative results depending on the structure of the activity. More specific about teaching and learning processes, we analyze the instructional process in classroom, the evaluative program, and on the other hand, about educative results, the emotional, affective, relational, and motivational factors of learning, the academic performance, and the inclusion processes in classroom. Well, I'm going to describe the cases and methodology. We use an observational strategy in physical education during one didactic unit, more or less 8 sessions, and we study 3 cases in depth, independently. So it depends of the teaching action of teacher uses. Depends of the structure of the activity. The case 1, the teacher uses a structure of the competitive activity. The case 2 uses a structure of the individual activity. And finally, the case 3 uses a structure of the cooperative activity. I'm going to present the objective. The objectives are describe, analyze, and interpret the instructional process and the evaluation program of 3 cases with different educational proposals carried out by the teacher in the classroom. The second one is to analyze the influence of each educational proposal on the factors involved in learning: emotional, relational, motivational, and affective, academic performance, and the degree of inclusion of students. So it's more important for the contextualization of the thesis. It's necessary to link the conceptual issues of the theoretical framework and the data collection instruments. Well, I'm going to present these relations. The first 8 is the socio-constructivist conception of the processes of teaching school learning, that it is analyzed by observation of a didactic unit of 3 cases with different educational proposals: cooperative, individual, and competitive. The second is the instructional process in the classroom, that is divided by 2 aspects. The first one is the activity structure, that is it analyzed by the guideline for observation and analysis of instructional processes and integrative proposal by COI. On the other hand, about evaluative practices, is it analyzed by dimensions for the analysis of the teacher evaluative programs. On the other hand, about learning students, the factors involved in the teaching learning process, we know that there are two types, but we focus on emotional, affective, relational, and motivational, that in the next slide I'm going to present. The fourth H is the academic performance, that is analyzed by academic grades of the students in physical education of the observed didactic unit, that is an indicator to analyze this academic performance. And finally, the fifth H, that is the processes of inclusion in the classroom that are analyzed by Index for Inclusion, that analyze the students, the family of students, the school center, and finally the teachers of these cases. Finally, I'm going to present and I'm going to show you every learning factor linked by some instrument: self-esteem, the possible eyes, the observational patterns, the academic motivation, that is a questionnaire, the class motivational climate, and finally the representations and expectations about teacher and their students with an interview and a focus group. And thank you for your attention. It's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Xavier, for this presentation. We will have now the next presentation by Gulshan Famita-Freshi, and she's going to present IoT performance improvements by means of passive technologies.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gulshan Famita-Freshi, a PhD student from WINE Research Group. The title of my presentation is IoT Performance Improvement by Means of Passive Technologies. But first of all, we need to know what Internet of Things is. Simply, it enables internet connection between enormous devices and cover many applications from smart home to healthcare. For example, in smartphones, there are thousands of sensors, wireless sensor nodes, which are managing irrigation or quality of the crops or any other operation, but usually they use batteries in order to power up these sensors. And batteries have limited lifetime and they need a replacement. This is not cost effective, so we are looking for another solution which can be scalable, environment friendly, and provide a long lifetime for the devices. This solution can be provided by passive technologies. Here is the outline of the presentation. First, I'm going to give you a brief introduction, and then I will explain the main concept of the presentation, followed by methodology and objectives, and I will sum up the presentation by final remarks. battery life, long battery life of the devices and energy consumption is a common requirement for all the IoT devices. Here we have the revenue model of the energy harvesting in IoT technologies, which shows that by the end of 2019, it reaches to 3,200 million euros. And the pie chart shows that commercial and residential sectors use energy harvesting application more than other applications. It's because of the increasing trend of smart cities and smart homes. They try to minimize the size of the devices or even remove the batteries from devices. So what is passive technology? Passive technology in wireless communication relates to a kind of communication that doesn't need any external energy source for transmitting data. It can achieve by energy harvesting. For example, in the left side, we have two devices that powered by solar energy. They are used usually in smart farms, and the other one, the blue one, is the vibration energy harvester, which is deployed inside the wind generator. And what is backscatter? Backscatter is a method of communication that here signal used for powering the tag and the communication. So the tag here doesn't have any battery or need any external source of energy. Here you can see two examples of the backscatter RFID, the contact lens and the patch, which is put on the human body in order to transmit the information. Medium access control means usually controls the communication through a medium, share medium, and in different application of the IoT, we need different kind of MAC protocol. When we using energy harvesting in IoT application, we need some kind of modification in this level. Basically, we divide this MAC in three different categories. The first one can support scalability and robustness, but it cannot support application with low latency. It cannot prioritize the access to the channel. The second one can reduce the amount of energy by reducing the number of the collision, but the mechanism still is complex. The third one, which is the combination, the hybrid MAC, which is the combination of the two first, can reduce the amount of energy while provide a simple MAC with very high flexibility. The popularization of IoT create different technology and standards. Here I put them, some of them in green. These are the open standards or the one that have a priority to the others. For example, Wi-Fi Halo, which is an amendment of IEEE 802.11, is specially designed for IoT use cases. RFID itself can be a passive technology and can provide ultra low power, and narrowband IoT is a cellular low power wide area network which has a very long coverage range. So here we can say that we are not alone in this field, because there have been many research in energy harvesting for IoT. For example, in the first one, the authors try to use outdoor and indoor solar cells in order to power up devices for smart farms and smart homes. In the second one, authors try to use a mechanical energy harvester for smart condition assessment in an old bridge. And the last one, the authors design self-sustainable IoT device which use kinetic energy from human body activities such as walking or relaxing or cycling. The same for Mac layer. Researchers try to design an adaptive Mac layer to energy harvesting. In the first one, they try to prioritize the data frames by using a very short beacon frame. In the second one, in the right side, they try to attach smaller packets together to make a super packet and try to avoid the different number of the headers so they can reduce the amount of energy. In the last one, which is an on-demand Mac, they provide a specific energy profile for each sensor node based on the energy harvested. Here is the methodology of the project. We divided in 3 steps. In the first step, by using an energy model, we can understand the limitation and requirement of the IoT technology, and based on this result, we can design a novel Mac protocol which is compatible with energy harvesting. And then the feasibility and accuracy of this proposed model will be evaluated in a real world scenario through a simulator. So the main objective of this project is to design a mechanism that will enable the amicable operation of passive technologies in IoT devices. In order to gain this objective, we divide we define 4 different sub-objectives. You can see the objectives here, and all the tasks with specific duration are defined in Gantt chart. Based on the prediction, IoT connection will grow to 25 billion by the end of the year 2025, and the IoT revenue will reach to $3 trillion. So this increasing trend shows the importance of the IoT paradigm, and will give us this opportunity to get involved with this, and we can gain benefit both from technical part and marketing sector. We also want to have a collaboration with Joseph Finnegan from Maynooth University in Ireland, and I have to mention that the main part of this project will be done in Network Simulator 3. So we believe that it is necessary to think green. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, we will have now the 4th presentation this afternoon, and we have with us Vera Vidal, and she will present us, I hope it's the same title here, Comunifying from Inside the State, the case of La Comunificadora, and the promotion of alternatives to capital.
Thanks, everyone, for sticking around, and for those of you who are in the middle of digestion, it's totally understandable. Before I dive into the specific part of my PhD, just to give you a little context, I'm part of the D-Months research group here at IN3, And I'm more particularly working on what's been coined platform cooperativism, which is basically a response from Silicon Valley startup models of development of platforms, especially what was at first called sharing economy, but then shown to have fairly detrimental social impacts. And the idea of platform cooperativism is to combine cooperativism, so the fact of owning collectively a company, with open technology, both open software and open data, to basically protect the rights and working conditions of the workers. And so Barcelona has been kind of a hotspot, apparently, for trying to develop models that have to do with finding those alternatives. And what's been particularly interesting when I started the fieldwork was to realize that it wasn't done only from the industry or like from activists, but the state at its local level had a particular stake, at least in trying to organize basically the actors. So basically, when I'm talking about the state here, it's really at the local level, and it has to be understood, of course, in the context of Barcelona en Comú, that you're all familiar with, and their election, and how they basically kind of brought a new agenda called the one of new municipalism, with the purpose of democratizing institutions by distributing outward decision-making and power. And basically, so they try to both reassert the public leadership in terms of urban economy to contain the influence of the private sector. At least that was what was part of the program, and also had to confront the challenges of platforms, especially as Glovo or Airbnb that you're all very familiar with. And so basically, when I tried to understand, like, why would the state trying to give resources and attention to foster platform cooperativism, then it made sense that it had kind of two different levels. One was basically trying to emulate that political power redistribution on an economic level by kind of fostering local networks rather than basically fostering multinationals. And on the other hand, it also had to do with basically creating new actors that you can work with, because it's not only about having a dynamic economy, they can also become providers for people you cooperate with. And so through basically collaborative policy process, they came up with a particular program, La Comunificadora, that has been developed through the Barcelona Activa, which is the economic promotion agency of the city. So basically what I did was follow the third edition through participant organization and also do interviews with the projects from the first two editions. That's basically a total of 40 projects. And La Comunificadora was basically termed as like trying to develop a commons-oriented sharing economy. And so the first thing I tried to look at was what are the ways through the program that they're actively trying to foster those different models, whether they're co-ops or others. First thing is what I'm terming normalization, which is basically making the idea known and presented on an equal footing as what you're usually used to, which means not only cooperatives, as also like as good as like a nonprofit or SL, but also open technologies, which are usually part of the public was like already pretty activist, but a lot of people were totally unfamiliar with these. Technical support, which is of course like basically more direct mentoring, but also has to do with kind of changing the model, right? From going from an extractivist to a commons-oriented one. It also means that you're gonna change the way you're developing. You're not starting immediately with the technological tool. The point is to find a community, to understand the needs and wants, to then build a technology that's considered as a common good. I mean, a common resource that can be replicated by other locales. And last, intercooperation, as we saw this morning, that's pretty essential in the social and solidarity economy. So very briefly, we saw that the projects that are coming, well, first the question is like, are they going to be able to survive? Because a bunch of them come as already consolidated projects, but a lot of them are mere ideas. And out of the 30 projects that came from the first 2 editions, only 12 are still operating either as pilot or like kind of fully operating. And we've seen 2 things. First, that there's usually a lack of funding, at least from the private sector, so they need to be able to secure a public subsidy. And this makes them also kind of vulnerable when it comes to being able to choose a legal form. Because right now in Catalonia, you have very few public subsidies for cooperatives. So more of them are going more towards nonprofit or even SL than being able to be a cooperative. But the relationship to the state does not, of course, end at the program. They are dependent on many legislations, whether they're local, regional, national, European, and depending on what they want to do, because those projects cover every possible sector, from urban agriculture to sustainable tourism to local network, local neighborhood network. Depending on what they want to do, they have to be able to interact with different actors, different departments. And what we're seeing is that the state is not a homogeneous actor. Each department has its own logic. And what the social and solidarity economy department might want to promote might be not necessarily in the interest or even just in the agenda, but in some of the cases, you might have a confluence of basically political agendas. So this is just what I wanted to present to you. But I'd like to end with something. As you've heard, like a lot of this idea of platform cooperation relies on the whole idea that it's open. Open software, open data, etc. I recently went to see a conference by Cathy O'Neill. I'm sure that you're familiar with her. She's an activist mathematician who wrote a book called Weapons of Math Destruction about the problem that the negative social impact that algorithms are causing. And one of the things that she pointed out that was quite intriguing to me is she was demanding fairness of algorithms, not openness. And as a question to all of you, do you think that the one can go without the other? I'd be very interested in hearing some of your thoughts about that. Thanks very much.
Okay, we will follow now with Jessica Pesantet Narvaez, presenting predictive modeling with risk analytics.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk briefly about my whole PhD thesis, but actually in a very brief way, okay? And it is about predictive modeling with risk analytics. Okay, so a brief structure of the presentation. I will first introduce about what I'm going to talk about, and then I will describe each one of the 3 papers that I intend to follow during my PhD studies. Okay, so to start with, a central role of risk analysis involves understanding and reducing the impact of extreme events, because they might have like disruptive effects on the well-being of people. And that is why it's like so interested in finding the causes and implications of their occurrence. Although there has been a steady increase in the large number of research tackling questions related to these topics, their accuracy in the predictions of extreme events remains to be difficult and quite unclear. Why? Because traditional methods for risk analysis have been developed so far assuming a general lack of data, and also because agents or individuals may rationally choose to ignore information related to the extreme events if this information is costly or inaccessible. So to handle this issue, I focused my PhD thesis in 4 important bases. The first one, big data. Second one, intensive computing and machine learning approaches. Third one, advanced analytics. And 4, risk analysis. The idea is to answer more research questions with extreme events. that seems to appear quite often in economics. For instance, we'll have better comprehension of the understanding of phenomena such as the occurrence of school dropout, natural disasters, the occurrence of real bubble states, for instance. So all in all, my research aims to provide a methodological approach to improve the comprehensions of risk in economics and insurance phenomena by developing tools that properly or actually accurately model and predict unexpected events. So the first one will focus on the analysis of extremes. I will focus on the modelization and binary dependent variables. A binary variable, it's a result of a Latin random variable that triggers an event when it's high enough. So at the time of modeling this type of variables, we might face like two cases. There are a lot, but I will focus on two cases: when they are class imbalance or when they are rare events. Class imbalance means that the observations among classes are not equally distributed. So one has more than the other. And a rare event means that the majority class has thousands to hundreds more observations than the other, which means that the rare event is really infrequent to happen. So what happened here? That traditional methods tend to underestimate the probability of occurrence of the minority class. So there's actually a vast literature devoted to handle this type of problems with imbalanced data and rare events. And in particular, machine learning methods exhibit bias towards the majority class. I have also tasted that. So too little attention is paid to new algorithms that handle imbalanced data, but in the framework of economics, and we will see how. The objective here is to provide an alternative modeling strategy that minimizes the error of prediction. So we get motivated by the following weighting procedure. That will be the difference between the Y response, which is the response, the predictive response, and the mean response. So this will be calibrated by theta, which is the judgment parameter that will give more or less weight to the observations which are closer part to the mean. This will be optimally found, and we'll run a synthetic exercise trying to predict if a policyholder purchased a full coverage or a basic coverage. Okay, in this way, it is the binary decision problem that at the beginning will be modeled by a logistic regression, but will be compared with a new version of the logistic regression. So the root mean square errors for the smallest and the highest deciles will be presented here. And we see that in both cases, the error has reduced. This means that we have not only improved the accuracy of the model, but we also changed and improved the comprehension of the phenomena. Why? Because the coefficient estimates and probably the significance of these coefficients has changed as well. So the hypotheses that were constructed before now will be like better, have more robustness, of course. The second part, what happened here? I tried to give more applications to the economics and insurance phenomena. So the development of economic science has also evolved by the empirical analysis, not just by the theoretical one. So it has been gaining more reliability. And new types and sources of data can impact the science positively. Why? Because more research questions can be answered. Of course, because before, more simplifications of the model were done. So now with more data, more research questions can be done. However, a specific machine learning method for social and economic predictions has not been proposed yet, in the sense that traditional machine learning methods are not able to provide coefficient estimates. So they leave aside the interpretation of the coefficients of the variables on a response. And the ones which are highly accurate tend to overfit the model. So regularization is a typical, or there are some other methodologies to handle this problem. Directly damage the interpretation and the accuracy of the coefficient estimates that we will have, because they don't provide coefficient estimates. So no attention is paid to the effect of the coefficient estimates. In the sense, the second part aims to contribute to propose an alternative machine learning method, or actually a method that allows the interpretation of the coefficient estimates and handles the overfitting. This is quite challenging, I know, but the idea is to take the AG boost as a reference model, which is the additive, it's an additive model that builds declassification and regression trees. But the idea is to try to adapt some base trainers like robust base and kernel based, which are previously modified, that could be introduced there. There has been like some synthetic exercise that tells me that I'm going in the right direction. However, there is still some work to do. The data that I will take for this exercise is telematics data. A GPS device will collect all the driving behaviors that the policyholders are doing. So I'll have all their patterns, their driving patterns. And as the third one, economic data are also found in surveys. But surveys are usually conducted based on complex sampling designs rather than on simple random sampling. So we tend to lose a bit of efficiency when complex random sampling is used. However, the randomness that the analysts intend to control might be provided or might be given not just by controlling the sampling weights, but also comes from the sampling procedure that the survey has been taken on. So Lumley established and demonstrated that it is important to model with taking into consideration the sampling design. So too little attention is paid to predict accurately rare events in complex surveys. I mean, just taking into consideration these two approaches. So the objective here is to transform a supervised machine learning method, in particular a penalized logistic regression, in order to predict rare event in a survey data with a complex survey design. So I'll aim to combine like two approaches. First of all, control the randomness of a sample procedure by incorporating new West estimators, incorporating the complex sampling design, of course, the sampling weights, which gives the idea that the study is more representative, and at the same time, incorporating this or providing more sensitivity to the model, which is the idea to detect more rare events, positive cases, by a weighting procedure. So I will use a survey taken from Ecuador about employment, but this survey is has the same sampling design that we use here in Spain. So it is a biotypic probabilistic stratified sampling design. And that's it. The idea is to improve has another approach for economic science with big data tools. Thank you.
Okay, we reach the end of this session with the last presentation by Tairín dos Santos Diaz, and she will be presenting Feminist Strikes in Barcelona, an ongoing dispute of contentious discursive practices.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Last but not least, I'll be presenting a little bit of my fieldwork, which is for the thesis, and since November 2017 I've been doing some participant observations and online research on the feminist strikes in Spain. Perhaps you have heard of it. In 2018 and 2019, around 6 million people either did partial or 24-hour strikes in the country. So basically the idea behind a feminist strike is that if we, and by we I mean women, stop, the world stops, basically because the world doesn't revolve only around economic activities and, well, the world of work, let's say, but also at least about care, and they also include the branches of student strike and consumption strike. So here we have a little bit of a picture that shows that in feminist strikes here in Spain, the grievances that they take to the streets are much more than just gender equality or talking about the glass ceiling or the inequalities regarding salary, but it's also about many other things related to body, to sexuality, and to many issues. To give a bit of context, so 2008 crisis, that was a very important moment to redefine the conditions not only of workers but also of women in Spain. And in 2017 we have the International Women's Strike, or in Spanish El Paro Internacional de Mujeres, which was directly an influence and an inspiration for the strikes that happened in Spain in the following 2 years. And of course the far-right boom, as we know, Vox and, well, Trump and all over the place. So it's been a motivation as well for big mobilizations from feminist movements. And specifically in Barcelona, we have 15M in 2011, which was a very relevant moment to bring together networks, and specifically here, a group called Feministas Indignadas. So from this group, they started doing what they call Vaga de Todas, or every women's strike, in the years of 2014 and 2015. Also another important experience to build up knowledge and repertoires and ways of understanding how women can have an impact and how can they actually show their grievances. So, as I said, the feminist strike in Spain is developed in 4 branches: labor, education, care, and consumption. So it's not a general strike as any other, but it contemplates the aspects that are invisible in which women also participate. Regarding what they were upset about, they were basically bringing to the table criticism regarding capitalism, patriarchy, or homophobia, a bunch of questions that are actually huge systemic problems that could not be solved just like in 1 year in the discussions of a group that would get together in some of the national encounters, for example, that they held since 2017. So this is an ongoing debate. Of course, they haven't come up yet with the solution, but what they intend with the strikes is to attack broad issues and to try to come up with political alternatives. So why strike? It's one of the questions that I ask some of the women that I interview, and for some of them, is a process. It's about building a network, and it's about leading the feminist movement in Spain and in Barcelona to be a denser group, and by doing this process, then they would reach these political alternatives. For other people, it's just a tool as any other. So they could be doing marches again, or they could be doing direct action or whatever, but the strike is just a tool as any other. It could be just replaced in next year, for example, when the 8th of March is going to fall on a Sunday. And last but not least, feminist strikes can be also means to build a political project, because you bring together so many issues. And of course, it's not only about discussing violence against women or the glass ceiling, as I was saying, but it's about bringing these issues together and criticizing them in a way that they can also build something else that addresses these different issues that impact the lives of women in very different ways. And as expected, there is counter-resistance, and it's an ongoing debate as well from those that don't think that women should be doing strikes or don't think that they should be going on marches at all. So here I have a couple of examples. The first is a tweet from an Argentinian right-wing politician, writer, journalist, and he's basically saying that a bunch of women are not going to be on the streets, but are actually going to be with boyfriends, brothers, friends, well, with men on the 8th of March. And the second one is from Vox. It's from this year. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's actually 2019, the second one. And they were actually the group or the account on Twitter with the highest page rank, combining mentions and retweets. So they had a lot of traction on the debate of the feminist strike in 2019. And they're basically saying they're not going to join because they think it's just another way of victimizing women. So here I show a little bit a first try of a co-occurrence hashtag network, which is also something that for those in computer science, if anyone could give me a hand on doing things like this, I also leave this to the crowd. But anyway, here we have a Catalan hashtag community, and over there also a community in Italian. So showing that the feminist strike is a obviously transnational campaign, even though in Spain it was much stronger than in other countries. And they also use hashtags in not only in Italian, but for example in Spanish to connect and to gain traction through the viralization of hashtags in Spanish. And to the other side, it's going to be a bit small, but there are a bunch of hashtags like feminazi and I won't go, or it doesn't represent me, or don't talk through me, or by me. Anyway, so it's just to show a little bit of first tries that I did with data from Twitter. And just as a conclusion, there is also a lot of disputes and fragmentations and contradictions inside of the organization of the strike itself. A lot of groups and women from different perspectives, from different experiences, coming from either Latin America or Africa, come together with women from Catalonia or other parts of Spain. And of course, they have very different ways of understanding feminism, and they have very different demands as well, even though we might think that they might be upset about the same things. It's not actually what I was able to see on the field. So these are basically just some attempts to try to understand the disputes. So if it's either about subjectivity, or if it's about emotion, or what comes from their own daily experience, or if it's about reason, if it's about disputing ideas. So I see a little bit of disputes over that aspect. Or if it's about identity or pragmatism, if it's about who you actually are, if you're a black woman, if you're a migrant woman, or if it's about the fact that they're going to build a project together, they're going to come to terms with a minimum common, or if it's about legitimacy, and legitimacy is also connected to the second one. The legitimacy is connected to identity, or is it connected to the ideas that they're bringing to the table? And the last one is which arenas to fight. So are the primary arenas inside of feminism itself, or they should be engaging with, let's say, challengers outside of feminism? So these are aspects that I'm trying to connect and use to solve the puzzle of the fieldwork. And that's it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.